Hey guys, welcome to Newswave. Now, there's not a lot of time for introductions, unfortunately, because there's a lot of stuff to talk about, so let's just get started. Now, the big reason there wasn't any time for introductions is because a story just broke before I'm going on camera here, and I sent some emails and stuff confirming this. Right now, I want to say this looks to be a potential leak of Star Wars Battlefront 2, the announcement trailer that was probably going to play sometime in the next couple weeks. I think there's a Star Wars Celebration event coming up that they may have been wanting to play it at. But right now, it ended up being posted unlisted, an unlisted account, which is a big deal because then that means it's not publicly viewable and someone put it on there and wanted to share it with other people. Leaked out online. Forums like NeoGAF, GameFAQs, and everything picked it up. Reddit just recently picked it up, and it looks like the real deal. Otherwise, somebody's extremely talented and was able to make this spot. Here it is here. It's like a 30-second spot. If you want to check out the entire thing, I'll leave a link to the actual video in the description, but there's a chance it is gone by the time you see this. I just saw it. I just picked it up, and I wanted to bring it to you guys so you could see it. From there, we're going to talk a little bit about this trailer. It looks really cool because the biggest thing, my biggest complaint about the original Star Wars Battlefront that was on the PS4 and the Xbox One and the PC is that there wasn't a lot of content. The story was like non-existent pretty much, and from there you would play for a bit, you would run out of stuff to do, and then you would probably stop playing the game. But this one looks different. Biggest difference obviously is that there's a story being set up here. There's narration to kind of set the story and set everything in motion. You have obviously full-scale battles, but you have stuff from the original prequels as well, which is really cool. Like Darth Maul is there, and they have the droids and everything, and it looks like it's going to kind of span the original series as well as stuff leading up to things like Return of the Jedi. So it looks like they're going to tackle a lot, but it also looks like they have their own unique story here. It looks like they bring in a character in, and they're going to write an entire story around it. That was our biggest complaint. We need a story. Looks like they're listening. This spot looks legitimate. Check it out and let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. But if everything holds up, I am very excited right now about this. But until Sony comes to the table and shows us the spot, don't, I guess, get completely behind it, because there is always a very slim chance, like I said, it looks very professional, slim chance that this is not true. But man, does it look true. From there, I want to jump over that timer for Sega. Remember how a while back I talked about how that there was a timer that Sega had set up on a website after fans found in the Steam game that there were achievements that had a URL that led you to a website that had a timer on it. And we were trying to figure it out for the longest time. What does this timer mean? It was going to run up yesterday, and it did. And what we found out was it wasn't necessarily leading up to just an announcement, it was leading up to a release time for a game. And a lot of people kind of figured this. It did turn out to be Bayonetta 1 being released on the PC, specifically on Steam, and they released it. The system settings are pretty low. You can pretty much play this on most computers. I mean, the requirements aren't high. Granted, you still need a video card, but for the most part, the requirements are kind of low. But they do leave a lot of options open, so you can use all the pretty settings and stuff you want on your computer. If you have the hardware to run it, you can run it 4K. You can turn anti-aliasing completely on, anisotropic filtering. You can turn all this stuff on and make the game look as pretty as possible while running at 60 frames. And you know what? Everyone's going to do that and post it on YouTube, because that game was already good looking on the 360 and the PS3 and the Wii U, and now it's just going to look better. So I'm excited to see how it looks. It's $20, which is pretty fair price, I think. I'll probably buy it and download it on the computer just because I obviously have a computer that should be able to run it at highest settings and just try it out, see how it looks. And I talked about Dragon Quest XI in a video last night, so if you have not seen that, go check it out, because it talks about cross-save between the 3DS and the PS4 version that were shown off heavily the other night. So what happened was, in a stream for Square Enix, their Japanese YouTube account, they showed tons of gameplay footage for the PS4 and the 3DS, and they documented when it was coming out and the special edition that caught a lot of people off guard. So the release date for both versions right now, this is the PS4 and the 3DS version, is July 29th in Japan right now. Now, there's no date, time frame, anything for localization outside of Japan being translated to different languages and brought over to different areas. Nothing about that. All we know is July 29th, it's coming out, 3DS, PS4, and they're going to have a password system to allow you to transfer saves back and forth, depending on which one you're playing on. And they went ahead and compounded on top of that by bringing us a special edition that will sell in Japan for $135 USD, so United States dollars then converted to Japan, or Japanese yen, would then be $135 in USD. They're going to sell it. It's going to be a PS4 and a 3DS version in a very, very nice looking special edition where you have two books that look like they open up and each one is kind of burrowed out and you have the game in either one. And overall it looks great. $135 might be a little pricey considering the games themselves together would be a little over $100 here, but there are a lot of extra things that come with it, and you know what? It looks really nice. I like when packaging like that actually has time and energy put into it rather than just being kind of like a throwaway special edition. So I would be very interested in that special edition. However, it's interesting to note that there is still no timetable for the Switch version. When asked about it, they just said, well, we can't really talk about it right now. Maybe it comes out when these two versions come out. Maybe it comes out later. I personally think, this is just me, that they don't want the Switch version to come out alongside those two because it's only releasing in Japan currently. The Switch is super hot in Japan, right? Well, why would they want a version of the game to come out that negates the idea they have there where they want you to buy the 3DS and the PS4 version? They want you to buy both versions if they can get you to, because one is portable, one is at your home console, obviously, and you can transfer your save between the two of them. The Switch can already do that. You only need to buy one game then for the Switch, so you can leave it at home or take it with you, and it would run on the Unreal Engine 4 engine just like the PS4 version will. So why would they cut themselves out of potentially 2 sales per person by selling one Switch version? That's me personally. That's why I believe they are doing this. Maybe it's taken a little longer to get set up on the Switch, but Unreal Engine 4 has shown to be very easily ported between the Switch and the PS4, and it's very scalable, so I'm not really sure what the problem is, but it could also be translation and stuff. But again, if it's released in Japan only, you just move it over. So who knows from there, though? They are probably going to give us a date eventually, maybe alongside Nintendo in a direct of some kind, but we'll have to wait and see. Speaking of cross-console interaction, we do have Gears of War going between the two now, so you will have the option, if you are on the Xbox, to play against your PC counterparts if you want. There's going to be a toggle, basically, when you go in from now on, that you can check if you want, and then all of a sudden, you're being matched with PC gamers. Now, they don't technically have a solid release date set up for this yet. They just said sometime in the next couple months they will do this, but this does kind of bring into question that entire debate that people go through with PC and console gamers fighting each other in competitive matches, and if it's fair, because of course if it's a shooter, a mouse tends to be a lot more accurate than, say, a control stick, despite people always saying that controllers can match PC with its keyboard and mouse. I think it's pretty obvious that's not the case at all. You can do a lot of stuff with keyboards and a mouse that you can with a controller, whether it's sensitivity or just being more accurate in general with a cursor. I think what Microsoft should really do in this case is give the ability for developers to let these people use keyboards and mouses in their games. Why not? What's the problem? Okay, maybe you're going to then go against other people on that console with that, against a controller, but at that point you're admitting, as a game developer who doesn't seem to want to ever admit this for some reason, that a keyboard and mouse is an unfair advantage in their console game. Overwatch has had this problem for a long time. They don't want you to use a keyboard and mouse when playing against other controllers, just because, I don't know, I guess because that's not the way they designed it is how they've said that. But I do think in this case, it's okay. If the person checks and opts in to play against a PC gamer, they did it, right? So they can't really complain that somebody's using keyboard and mouse if you're playing against other PC users. I think this is fine because this does still stay inside Microsoft's ecosystem of PC and Xbox One. And you know what? It just gets people who wouldn't normally be able to play together the ability to play together. So from there, I'm going to jump over to emulator news. Now, I know I've talked about CEMU or SEMU or whatever you want to call it. I know I've talked about it quite a bit recently, and that's mostly because it affects Nintendo in a way that emulators have not affected companies before. Well, now, there's another emulator kind of coming up the ranks, and it's going to affect Sony and Atlus much like this other one has affected Nintendo. Now, maybe not to the extent, because they don't have the money or resources that CEMU or SEMU has, whatever you call them again. They don't have the resources that they have. They don't. They don't have that $30,000 Patreon backing them, but they do have a Patreon, about $1,000 or so, and they are attempting to program an emulator that works with the PS3, and they've already been successful. They've had Persona 5 running on the PC, and it runs fine. They have minor, obviously, frame drops here and there as they optimize it, but otherwise it works well. Minor graphical glitches, but they said it's completely playable. And now they're testing other games, and other games are working. So here is Sony and Atlus now faced with the same conundrum that Nintendo is faced with Breath of the Wild across from Persona 5. Because yes, Persona 5 is a big deal for Sony, and it's a big deal for Atlus. Atlus, overall, I mean, they don't even want you to stream the thing. Now here's an emulator that can play their game because it's on the PS3. If they had just left it and brought it over to the PS4 and not released the PS3, then they would have been fine. But of course, they were faced with the same problem that Nintendo was, where they have made these promises. It has to come out on the older system, and it just happens that somebody's developing an emulator that can play it. Now, I don't think it's going to affect sales, much like how the other emulators didn't affect Breath of the Wild sales heavily, because Breath of the Wild sold well. And I don't think it's going to affect it too much. It's still not in a state that people would buy it and be like, oh, I have an i7 and like a GTX 980 or 1080 even, and been like, oh, great, I'm going to play Persona. You probably would have just bought a $90 to $100 PS3 and then the game and just played it that way and saved a bunch of money. So I don't think it's going to affect sales to that extent. But it's interesting to see this problem again with emulators where they're catching up to current games to the point where you can just play these games on a computer rather than buy the system. Also, one more quick piece of emulator news, I promise this is it for now, but it looks like the Galaxy S8 that has come out plays GameCube games well, actually really well, almost flawlessly. Now, apparently when it gets to a certain point after about 20 minutes, it starts to heat up and thermal throttling kicks in, so the frames start to drop just because of how hot the phone gets. But to me, this just shows one more time that the Switch is completely set up for emulation for GameCube, because Nintendo will write their own in-house emulator. They won't use Dolphin, and it'll run really well on there. So I think at this point, look, if that phone over there can run GameCube games, our Switch should be able to run GameCube games, and they need to make it run GameCube games. I mean, the S8 doesn't even have buttons, and it's running it. Who cares about analog triggers at this point? It doesn't even have buttons and it runs it. So bring it to the Switch. Even if needed, you know, bring a controller or let that adapter piece that we used for the Wii U work with the Switch as well. So there's a lot of ways around it. At this point, I have no problem hooking up a GameCube controller to my dock and my Switch to play it, and then kind of do some workarounds for the handheld mode. At this point, bring GameCube games over, and let's enjoy some Mario Sunshine, some Smash Bros. Melee, Twin Snakes. The list goes on. I mean, it really does. I would love to play Beautiful Joe on that 720p screen on the go. I think it'll look great. Nintendo, bring them over. Speaking of emulation and modders, jumping from there, let's talk about how people are starting to exploit the Switch and other systems like that. But the Switch is a big one right now because people are really trying hard to crack the system and open it up for homebrew. Well, Nintendo must see this. They have to, because they are offering up to $20,000 for hackers to tell them about exploits in the system. Now, this isn't a big surprise. I mean, they did the same thing with the 3DS, but this comes from HackerOne, which is kind of like a community, or like you could pretty much put bounties out, and you could pay these hackers or people who have great knowledge in programming. You could pay them to find these exploits in your system, and you're pretty much, essentially what you're doing is you're paying hackers to hack your system and then tell you how they did it, and then you pay them money. Now, Nintendo is offering anywhere from $100,000 to $20,000 for anything Switch related. They did this with the 3DS. I think they're a little done with the 3DS. I think they're starting to care less about that, obviously, and now they're pushing all the money at the Switch. How do we keep this thing safe? You spend money. You buy the hackers, essentially. You buy them, and they do it. Trust me, when they do this stuff, when they're emulating and they're trying to hack it and put emulators on it, they're not doing that for money. They're doing that for free, unless they have a Patreon set up like the people over at Simu and Semu have. They're mostly doing it for free or just for fun. This gives them a chance to help Nintendo and make some money in the process. Now, will they do it? That's the question. I will say money usually talks, and money probably will get them in on this and have them just give up the way they're doing it and tell Nintendo how to fix it. So it's interesting. Now, a lot of other companies use it. Pretty much anyone that does not have a large team for cybersecurity, people like GM, Uber, Slack, all these different companies do use this site and this bounty program, so it's not new. I think it's good for Nintendo to put this money in for security now rather than after it happens. And the last bit of news is pretty much Microsoft continuing to confuse me. I don't get what's going on over there, because it looks like they're letting another developer who is not technically owned by Microsoft or anything, but they were developing exclusively for Microsoft systems with the Xbox and 360 and then the Xbox One. Well, it looks like Remedy is going to be porting their North Side engine over to the PS4 in anticipation of a game that they're going to then, instead of put with just Microsoft systems like Quantum Break, for example, push it over to the PS4 on multi-platform support. Now, Remedy's current project is codenamed P7, and while there's no real details for it, we do know that it's going to be on the PS4 and the Xbox One more than likely, and it just begs the question, what is Microsoft doing right now? Like, what are they doing? They're letting developers for games get away from them. And this whole time, they're just focusing on the Scorpio, which is awesome. Trust me, I love when technology gets pushed forward. Great. but we need games to sell this thing, right? Now, here's Remedy moving another game to the PS4. We saw it with Titanfall on a different set. They moved to the PS4 as well for Titanfall 2, and I don't know if Microsoft has any plans for first-party support or buying third parties, because for a while there, they had no problem buying people for the 360. I mean, think about the games that were only on the 360 when they first came out. BioShock, Mass Effect, Lost Planet, Elder Scrolls, Oblivion. There were so many games that were only on the 360 because Microsoft put out big money for them, and then they kind of just stopped doing that, and they let these games go to the PS3. Now they're going to the PS4, and it's getting to a point where there's not a lot of games left around for Microsoft and the Xbox One that are exclusive to the system. They're all becoming multi-platform games, and it gets to a point where you ask yourself, well, what's the point in buying an Xbox unless I'm a big fan of Halo or I'm a big fan of Gears of War and I don't have a computer that can play them? Because it's getting less and less interesting to buy an Xbox. It's getting more and more interesting to buy something like a PlayStation 4 and a Switch as kind of your 1-2 punch, and then fall back on a PC for any of those Microsoft exclusive games on your Windows computer. And that's it for Newswave today, guys. Make sure you comment, like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Let me know what you think about anything we talked about today, whether it's this leaked trailer for Battlefront 2. Looks really good. I hope it's correct. I hope it's actually happening, but there's a lot of production value in that trailer, so I have to assume it's probably correct. Let me know what you think about the Northside engine going from the Xbox One to the PS4 now, so it will be a multi-plat game rather than specifically on the Xbox. It's very interesting what Microsoft's doing here. I'm not really sure what's happening. They're really confusing me right now. Also, let me know if you're excited for Dragon Quest XI, but you want it to be localized, right? Bring it over to the States and get that Switch date nailed down. We all want to know when it's coming out on the Switch as well, because based on what they want to accomplish with the 3DS and the PS4 version, the Switch version seems to be what they've wanted all along since they first started development. Let me know what you guys think down below. I will see you next time.